Welcome to the 12th Martin Luther King Jr. celebration sponsored by the YWCA Piqua. We are happy that you are able to be a part of this very special program. This program honors the American legends and ideals of nonviolence. We have many Piqua people who have worked to make today a memorable event and to celebrate the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you, Judy, for providing our music as we got together. Two little technical ideas. On your seats, you'll find a yellow sheet of paper, which we asked for you to complete at the end of the program and turn it in as you leave. This is a measurement tool and a vital piece of information that is required by the United Way for all member agencies. We appreciate your help with this. There will be a committee member at the door that will pick them up at the time. And one last idea, please remember to silence your phone.
We gather this afternoon to give thanks. Thanks for the legacy of a servant of God, a day on which we honor the life and the work of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To honor King is not only to rejoice and thank God, but it's also to take seriously the words and lessons that he taught us, and remember to be put into action, love, compassion, and truth to each other. I was reminded of Reverend King's, one of his last speeches. He spoke to the striking sanitation workers in Memphis. He says, "Now our struggle is for genuine equality, which means economic equality. For we now know that it isn't enough to integrate lunch counters. What does it profit if a person can eat at the lunch counter but doesn't have enough money to buy a hamburger?" Where's the justice in that? Would you pray? God of grace and glory, we pray for continued strength to harness the changes that must be made. May we hunger for continued changes, and Lord, not only hunger, but yearn for that which moves us closer and closer to equality and justice for all people. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for your servant, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the words of wisdom that he spoke. May those same words continue to resound again and again until we are all in unity as your people. We pray in the name of the Holy One of Israel, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Good afternoon. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God bless America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above, from the mountains to the prairies to the oceans. Like before, God bless America.
speaker today is Dr. Doreen Larson, who is the 5th president of Edison State Community College here in Piqua. Excuse me. She is the first female president of the college. Dr. Larson defines her duties as face, focus, and funding. She began her career at Lakeland Community College in Ohio as a faculty member, establishing the first office of services for students with disabilities. Working to now position Edison State, she is wanting us to be a critical partner in the economic development of Darke, Shelby, Miami, and now Preble counties through our workforce partnerships in programs. Under her leadership, Edison State has grown in enrollment and also added campuses in Troy and Eaton, Ohio. For the past 4 years, Dr. Larson has been recognized by the Dayton Business Journal as one of the 50 most powerful women in the greater Dayton area. Dr. Larson is also proud to note that her 3 sons and her husband all began their higher education careers at community colleges. We welcome Dr. Larson to our Martin Luther King Day Jr. celebration. Dr. Larson.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for everyone who's taken time out today to spend some time celebrating the life of Martin Luther King Jr. and understanding that you have other things that you could be doing, and so it is, I hope to make these remarks something that will be worth your time, and I know the celebration is obviously worth your time. I am the president of Edison State Community College, and as always, I'm so proud of my college and my colleagues, and so I would like any of my colleagues, including our adjunct instructors, to please stand right now to be with us. We have an amazing team at Edison State. Every single person, I can tell you, goes above and beyond for the students and for the community. They understand that working at a community college is an avocation along with a vocation, and it is a pleasure to work alongside them. I thank you, for asking me to make remarks today in celebration of Martin Luther King. I've given speeches, but there is just something very daunting about trying to add, comment, do anything to, again, that you think would be anything more important than the legacy that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. left himself in life. And yet I know, as I've been at events like these, it is also important to hear a new voice. It's also important to hear a new perspective on all of the accomplishments and things left to be accomplished that he had started in his life. So bear with me as I attempt to do that today. Also was mentioned that I'm a faculty, started my career as a faculty member. I remain, I think, a recovering faculty member and teacher at heart. We talked about that at Teacher Voice. But I did want to tell you today sort of the organization of my speech. Be ready, we will start with a quiz. I will give you a little bit of background in terms of a little historic interchange that has happened in my life, and then conclude with hopefully some action steps that you can interpret as homework. So first, in terms of quizzes, Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. is certainly a hero. We refer to him as a hero. We often use that word to think about his legacy. But I thought this morning I would ask, what does that mean? What does that mean to you? And just share why is the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. an American hero?
I don't think I'd be able to do the things that I'm able to do today without his example, his leadership, and his dedication to changing the way America works. Because we were dead set on the course until he got involved and did his protests and marches.
Changed the life. What else? Why is he a hero?
Someone you can look up to, out of respect.
He placed certainly his very existence on the line for those changes that he was working towards. Why else? Why is he a hero? Yes?
Dr. King is a hero because he dealt with the difficult issues of his time. He didn't display political cowardice. He undertook the need to address the key issues of the time, which was militarism, racism, and of course, economic issues dealing with the need for poor people's march for fame.
Thank you. In reflecting on how I was going to craft my remarks today, I was thinking of one of my heroes, and he'd come to mind because he's President Jimmy Carter. And President Carter had some health issues. He's certainly come to the forefront in the news for those. Most of I'm looking at the young faces, will know him as the man who started Habitat for Humanity. But he was a president of the United States, and my hero, because he had put forth, he was an expert in foreign relations, and he made great strides in foreign relations, understanding that would not have, he could have had a more powerful domestic legacy, he could have done many other things that would have made him a much more popular president, but he made the world a better place, and he understood that. He sacrificed his personal gains for the legacy of peace. And again, he is my hero, so I would argue he's one of the most accomplished presidents in that era. I wanted to see if Jimmy Carter had ever made any comments about Dr. Martin Luther King, being I knew that they were both from the same state. I did not know how much their legacies have crossed paths. As much as I thought I knew about Jimmy Carter, I did not know these things. So I will just share a brief history of these two heroes. Of course, they were both from the same state of Georgia. Both President Carter and Reverend King were the first and only two people to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Reverend King was the first man from Georgia to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. President Carter was the second. As a state senator in Georgia, Jimmy Carter called for statewide educational consolidation, and he called for an end to school segregation. At his inauguration in 1971, Jimmy Carter declared that his goal was to end racial discrimination in the great state of Georgia. He fought for civil rights. But most importantly, and I did not know this, we would not have Martin Luther King Day as a federal holiday if it was not for President Jimmy Carter. This was news to me. Jimmy Carter, so the background of Martin Luther King Day was very controversial. Some states had initiated the day, but getting it to be a federal holiday seemed insurmountable. President Carter, when he became president, in January 21, 1979, pledged his support for a federal holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, to celebrate his birthday, and he dogged that issue, and literally dogged the issue until it became law in 1983, signed by Ronald Reagan. So I'll come back to Jimmy Carter a little bit later. My remarks today were certainly inspired by the essay by Edison State student, Claire Ordering, her essay, and you'll hear parts of that later, Life Jackets for Everyone. And I decided to take my theme from that as about color, and how color becomes much less important to us as the stakes get higher. For instance, a drowning person is certainly not going to question the color of the life jacket that's thrown to them. Likewise, the color of the hand that pulls someone back on board is not important. Martin Luther King said, and those of you who know this, say it with me, I look to the day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He said, I look to the day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. When we reflect on Dr. King's words, we usually think about equal opportunity for people of color, equal pay, equal justice, life jackets for all. But today, I challenge those of us to think about skin color differently, about people not of color. How do white people fit into Dr. King's dream? He looked to a day when people would not be judged by the color of their skin. White, black, brown. The color of my skin is white. What's my role in equal justice? I am one of the recipients of the life jacket. How do I advocate for civil rights? Should I address issues which I do not have personal experience with? Should I? I'll share with you a personal experience that I had in my higher education career. I was elected to a commission, a national commission on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I had assumed when I was put onto this commission that it was because of my work for people with disabilities, and indeed it was. I had done a lot of advocacy for adults with disabilities to be able to go to college and ways to do that. So I was placed on this commission, diversity, equity, inclusion, most of which the agenda was for promotion of people of color into presidents, vice presidents, getting people of color into higher ed administration because they were not present. And I worked on that. I was then elected chair of that commission, diversity, equity, and inclusion, working for the promotion of people of color. I was elected chair again of that commission. And then again, overruling the rules on commission terms, I was elected again, chair of the Commission of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, national chair. I finally went to the committee. I got the nerve and I said to them, most of whom were people of color, I said, why do you keep re-electing a white chair of this group? I was uncomfortable, often, advocating for the group. I felt ignorant. I felt like a poser, trying to advocate for something that I did not understand. The answer from that committee was, I was able to get things done. I had connections. I had power. I had writing ability. And indeed, we were getting things done. We were changing ways that people were promoted. We were changing the way people were hired. We were changing how many people were getting to jobs. I could see that the needle was moving. Martin Luther King said the powerless will remain powerless until those in power do something. We are the people in power, people who are white. We need to change something. We need to make that power flow in a new way. Most of us here today, as I look out, are white. Our skin color should not hold us back from acting on issues of injustice and discrimination. In fact, it can be convenient. It can be an out for us to say, well, I really can't understand the African American experience, but I'll root you on. I'm behind you. I'm on the sideline. Claire writes in her essay, you'll hear later, about having a sense of guilt for her life jacket. We don't need to feel guilty, but we need to replace that guilt with gratitude. We understand that the best way to show our gratitude is to use our gifts, to value them, to make them worth more than they were when they came in our hands. We don't need to be guilty about power, but we need to use it in a very responsible way. So that takes me back to Jimmy Carter, the person responsible for the federal Martin Luther King Day that we celebrate today. Jimmy Carter used his power, his influence, his connections. He called in favors, no doubt. Martin Luther King was not going to happen. There are few people other than the President of the United States who could have overcome the controversy surrounding Martin Luther King Day and could make it happen. And he dogged it till it happened. So this is our call to action. We have not yet reached a time where the color of our skin does not matter. We know too well how the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. would feel about the events of today, of our year. We know how he would feel. We don't have to guess. Being a majority does not give us an out. It's not an excuse to sit by the side and cheer on some champion within the community. We can be the champion. We have the assets and the power to be the champion. We don't need to lead the large rallies. We don't need to lay our life on the line. Very few of us would be able to do that. But we can make a difference. We can make a difference to people, which makes a difference to all people. So part of your homework is to find how you would make that difference. Choose what you're passionate about. If you're passionate about health and wellness, make sure that health and wellness is being provided to everyone. I'm passionate about education. I've always worked to open education, knowing education is power. Education is the key. Education is the key to a better tomorrow. You can help someone go to school, encourage them to stay in school, help a child to read, give them that power. Don't let someone drown. Extend your hand. They're not going to brush that hand away because of the color of your skin. President Carter said, when he was asked to make some remarks on Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, he said that to many people, they think that Martin Luther King Jr. freed only black people. In truth, Martin Luther King freed all people. Let's remember this on that day, and I ask you please to extend your hand and take a hand regardless of the color. Thank you very much.
As has been mentioned, our reading was in first place at an Edison State Community College's Black History Month essay. That was 2 years ago. Claire Borderding was a Minster High School student in the College Credit Plus program at that time, and she was in Vivian Blevins' American Literature 2 class. The YWCA has adapted this essay for reading for today's program.
As a white woman growing up in a white community in America, I have learned that I was born with a life jacket. Each citizen is born into the waters that America presents to us. And among these waters, each citizen is expected to learn to swim and to thrive.
With the assistance of my college-educated, steady paycheck earning parents who provided me with the basic and excess needs, guidance to the deep waters, and a community to thrive in, otherwise known as my life jacket, I learned to swim.
Sadly, the America I live in today expects everybody to learn to swim with or without a life jacket. I realize that life jackets aren't chosen by the wearers, but the wearers are chosen by their circumstances.
I was given a life jacket, a product of my race, location, and economic status.
Unlike black people who are slowly gaining rights through the U.S. law, my ancestors and I have always had rights. While men of my own race were and are becoming U.S. presidents, the men of African race are still fighting for the opportunity to live the American dream.
The majority of the residents in my small town are white, while the majority of the inner city residents are black. Black people specifically encounter the shortage of life jackets.
This polarization of communities in which differing races live creates a cycle that neither promotes nor provides diversity among our schools, cities, and occupations.
As I have grown up, I have had the opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities that prove beneficial to my current and future contexts.
Unfortunately, many students lacking life jackets are more focused on having a job to support themselves and their families. Many of these teens are disproportionately black. Many of these teens are exposed to peers that are being incarcerated. Many of these teens are navigating currents and riptides that pull them back into the cycle.
When the lack of life jackets becomes an issue for minorities, I feel guilty. There are times when I feel pressured to remove my life jacket in order to create equality and reduce my privilege.
However, by removing my life jacket, I would struggle in the waters, as many people already do. Asking people to remove their life jackets to create equality would cause our country to regress, whereas giving life jackets would create progress.
The pathway to equality is not the removal of life jackets. It is creating and carrying out plans to provide to those who don't have one, providing opportunities, second chances, and communities to thrive in. Though doing so, each student, each citizen, is given the equal opportunity to swim.
Rather than feeling guilty, I will feel hopeful. Progress will be made when we decide to help one another.
It will be this generation, the one that Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of, that will grant all U.S. citizens, specifically the black citizens that have been disregarded previously, life jackets.
Thank you for coming and joining us today. Special thanks to our participants for sharing their talents in today's celebration. Captain Sheila Shoemaker, Veronica Gare, Josh Richard and his accompanist, and our Judy Lones, Daria Lee, and our presenters, Grace Ryan, Lance Reeves Hicks, Nora Lee Brower, and Bruce Jameson. and our special guest speaker, who gave us a lot to think about.
And homework.
I have a feeling we have not thought of Jimmy Carter in a very long time, so we do have our homework to do. Dr. Doreen Larson. Special thank you also goes out to our sponsors, Premier Health, the Upper Valley Medical Center, for their support of today's program. Thank you again for publicity and support from the YWCA Diversity Committee, Gail Peterson, the Miami Valley Today, the Dayton Daily News, WHIO, Piqua Area Chamber of Commerce, the City of Piqua, and Channel 5. Please remember to complete your yellow sheet before you leave and give it to a volunteer at the door. Finally, please stand and join together in our closing song, Let There Be Peace on Earth. The words are printed in your program. You're dismissed at the end of the song. Thank you.
We don't care.